in and out of the Beltway. From large cities to small towns to the rural heartland. From sea to shining sea. This is Wayman, Brunson, and Vernuccio. Inside the News.
Welcome back to another week of Inside the News. Glad to have you with us. We've got a plethora of topics that we're going to be discussing. Let's introduce the guys to us. Ben Brunson. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening to you, Ben.
Good day, gentlemen. Happy 4th of July. It's a very important holiday.
Absolutely. Frank, how are you today?
Well, greetings from New York City, the last city liberated by General George Washington, and the first city that needs liberating in 2026.
Boy, isn't that the truth? All right. Well, let's get right started here with this. The DSA, as they're known, Democratic Socialists of America. That's going to be their new party logo here, the DSA. Frank, go.
I am concerned. When there was a revolt in Russia, no one realized that eventually the Bolsheviks would take over and establish the USSR and all the horrors that came with that. In Germany, one of the most civilized countries in Europe, I don't think anyone imagined that a lunatic group like the Nazis could take over and wrought the damage that they did to the world and to the German people. Now we're looking at the United States, the DSA, and there's still a feeling of calm that, it can't happen here. This is America. We have institutions. We have laws. They won't be so bad. They won't be able to do everything they want to do. Folks, I'm here to tell you, don't believe that. It can happen here. It is happening here. New York City has become a communist-controlled city. It can spread across the nation. We see too often that vast amounts of funds, whether siphoned off from government programs and given to NGOs or other groups, we see dirty money coming from people like Singh from China, going into causes on the DSA side. It can happen here, folks, and it is happening here. Don't take these victories by the DSA lightly.
Okay, Ben, your thoughts.
Well, we have an enemy from within that is flourishing right now within the Democratic Party and finding a foundation to grow on, unless the Democrats start to push back. And I don't see any Democratic leaders who are doing so. They seem to have acquiesced to the growing energy of the socialist movement within the Democratic Party. A lot of Democrats go on TV and state openly that the Democratic Party should embrace socialism. And you have leaders such as, quote unquote, leaders such as Hakeem Jeffries, who basically says nothing. He's just a small road speed bump on the way to socialist victory over the Democratic Party is the way I see him. So the question is, who's going to merge in the Democratic Party to fight back against this? I think this is a existential threat to the Democratic Party. One would hope that most people who identify as Democrats, who are kind of working class Americans, would migrate to the Republican Party pretty openly at this point. And especially the new Republican Party under Donald Trump, he has fashioned a party that is far more aligned with the working class in this country than the Republican Party probably was 40, 50 years ago. And, I think represents a future power base that should go on to dominate politics in this country. But we're going to see socialism, unfortunately, is a product of ignorance. It is a product of the fact that the progressive left has taken over and captured the educational system in this country. And we have children who are growing up without any knowledge of history, without any knowledge of economics, without any understanding of what it is they are standing up and supporting when they argue that socialism is a great trend. The irony of all of this is that the embrace of progressive socialist ideologies in Europe have destroyed Western Europe's economy. There is no economic growth at all. In fact, jobs are starting to disappear at an increasing clip throughout Germany and France and the UK as manufacturing all but evaporates in those countries. All those big corporations that were manufacturing powerhouses after World War II, like Daimler and Audi and all those companies. They're all moving to the United States. They are all building all of their future plants and production capabilities in the United States. All those jobs are coming here. So as the United States starts to really leave the launch pad in terms of manufacturing, and it is happening in a major way, you have this growth of the socialist movement within the Democratic Party. It is very dangerous for the Democrats, very dangerous for America. It will destroy New York City and other cities that embrace it, like Chicago. But the rest of the country that stays free of that is flourishing and will accelerate rapidly from here.
You see people like Chuck Schumer and Frank right up there in New York. He is so deathly afraid of losing his seat that he's willing to kind of give in to the AOC. And AOC, Bernie Sanders found a willing participant in AOC. Here's this young gal who's a bartender in her early 30s, says, I'm going to be running for Congress, and she wins that seat. Well, there's a thing called clickbaits, okay, and the attractiveness of this gal and everything. She doesn't have to know anything. Bernie feeds it to her. And we saw what happened when she went over to Europe during that big conference. She had nothing to say. She was lost, a deer in the headlights, Frank.
Yeah, and of course, she gave us a thrilling discussion about World War XI. Um, you can't overestimate the ignorance of this particular individual. But look, we've got a problem that we talk about a lot on this show, and that is blind loyalty to the Democratic Party. And I've said frequently, you could put any candidate on the D line, and in certain blue cities, that candidate would get votes. And the most sterling example of that is New York City. New York City has the largest Jewish population outside of Israel. They had an anti-Semitic Islamic extremist supporting mayor who ran, and he got the support of Jewish Democrats, nevertheless. Part of that is the refusal by the Republican Party, I believe, to engage in the type of outreach and publicity that a political party really needs. And I'll give a personal example from my son's college days. He was somewhat active on the Republican side in college. When the Democrats threw a get-together for the students, they supplied food, they supplied music, they supplied great speakers. When the Republican students wanted to throw an event, they got absolutely nothing. Crickets from the local Republican Party. The Republican Party has failed to outreach. Now, the MAGA movement changed some of that, which is one of the reasons why the Democrats hate the MAGA movement so much. They discuss it in almost apocalyptic tones because they know it's the first time the Republicans have ever actually fought back. But as this goes on further, particularly in blue cities, we're going to have to see the Republicans stand up and fight and not give in to the fact that the Democrats have decades of outreach and publicity that the Republicans have never engaged in.
That's why Charlie Kirk was so dangerous to the Democrats, and that's why they did not like him, and they went after him with a furor, and he paid for it with his life. Ben, you struck on something which I think we need to talk about a little bit further, is the young people. They've not experienced it. We've all lived, with Sputnik and all that, and in the Russia deal and everything, and communism coming out of World War II. These young people today, they don't know anything of that. If they're 30 years old, that puts them right at the late 1990s here, Ben.
Yeah, they grew up in the post-communist and post-Soviet Union era, and they don't understand the contrast. They see China as a growing economy. They don't understand the China that lived through the Cultural Revolution of Marxist ideology, Chairman Mao's destruction and death machine that he ran, where at least 60 million Chinese were killed by their fellow, in almost all cases, young revolutionaries. You have a revolutionary movement, though, growing within the Democratic Party, and you can see it manifested in the treatment of Scott Wiener, the radical left San Francisco politician, a guy who supports ideas that are so far left it's hard to get your arms around them, and yet he is hated and vilified for the simple fact that he is a Jew who won't renounce Israel completely. And so he is under physical threat in San Francisco because he's a Jew. And that is the revolution in full swing. Very much like the pattern followed by real revolutions that you can go back to the 1917 revolution inside Russia. These revolutions usually turn on their own, consume their own. Intelligent Democrats have to wake up. There's got to be a lot more Fettermans out there who recognize that their party is headed towards the abyss the way it's going right now. I would fully expect a Fetterman to become a Republican and sometime in the future. I'm not saying it's going to happen in the next year or so, but if he stays in office, eventually he'll change parties because he clearly believes in things that are anathema or that are the opposite of what the Democrat Party believes in and where it's going, especially in its hatred of all things Jewish and its open embracing of violence against Jews, as you see in the case of Scott Wiener.
You know, when given the opportunity, these young people, when they're given the truth, Frank, and I want to go back to Charlie Kirk once again, when he went out there and spoke truth about family and, and about your wife and raising kids and all, this was all new to the young people. They had not heard any talk of that, and they gravitated to it. And the population of the GOP started to flourish and grow because these young people said, wow, that's what I kind of want. I want a family root system, not like what the communist left is doing, Frank.
If a foreign power had invaded successfully the United States and taken over our educational system as part of their success, they could not have done a more effective job than what our own educational system has done. We have now had 2 to perhaps 3 generations of young people brought up in an educational system run by people who don't like the United States, who don't like capitalism, who don't like the concept of personal freedom. It's not unexpected that having been trained like this from grammar school straight through graduate school, that these young people would then turn to the hard left because they have known nothing else in their educational system. A valid educational system would have mentioned, by the way, that socialism failed in the Soviet Union. Socialism, National Socialism, was a disaster in Nazi Germany. Socialism turned the oil-rich country of Venezuela into a swamp of poverty, but that's not what they were told. Were never taught any of this. America has been negligent in overseeing its educational system, and we should not be shocked or surprised that these people turn to socialism when they come old enough to vote.
And Ben, the Department of Education, Trump has made that a target. And Linda McMahon, he says, guess what? I want you to put yourself out of a job. And the Democrats they're going nuts over this.
Yeah, hopefully they'll continue to fire everyone associated with the Department of Education, even though I think it takes a congressional bill to actually close the Department of Education. But you can have it open with 1 or 2 employees. And that's fine by me, but that's only part of the issue. I mean, the real problem is what's happening at the states. Education is controlled at the state level, and you have states like New York, Illinois, and California that have just turned their state educational system over to the unions. They pander to the unions. The unions are ultra left-wing and progressive at this point. And as Frank said, they just teach nonsense. Look, I'm conservative largely because my dad was an airline pilot and I could fly for free when I was a kid. And I took advantage of that. I traveled throughout Latin America and Europe 50 odd years ago. And the contrast between the wealth of the United States and the poverty of so many countries was wickedly apparent back then. And you learn to appreciate how lucky we were to be Americans. I urge kids to travel now. You can go to Havana and stay there for peanuts. And if you get outside the few square blocks of the hotels, you can see what socialism brings. And you can walk around the unbelievable poverty of Havana, Cuba, that is the result of 60 plus years of socialist policies, where 80% of people are unemployed and try to make a living at $20 a month in income. It's unbelievable to watch how poor it is down there. Go down there and see it if you have some idea that socialism is great. Go see the reality for yourself.
Yeah, if you would go to Czechoslovakia or Hungary or Poland and some of those Eastern European countries, you'd see them starting to flourish. And then you walk into Great Britain and you're going to go, have I gone to a third world country? It is absolutely dangerous to go there now. Don't bring your own phone. Take a burner phone with you, because otherwise it could be confiscated and you can't even text what you want to text. Whole lot more on the on the program here. Stick with us. Ben Frank and I, we're going to be back talking about, why is Ukraine, are they just getting lucky attacking Russia, or do they have a plan and do they have a means and a definite strategy? More on Inside the News with Wayman Brunson and Venuccio. Stick with us. We'll be back.
You're listening to Wayman, Brunson, and Vernuccio, Inside the News.